Millionaire catches black cleaner studying in the dark. What happens next shocks everyone. What on earth are you doing here? Lionel Drake's sharp voice ricocheted through the empty penthouse at exactly 3 a.m., cutting across the marble the way a blade cuts silk. On the floor, between a neatly capped bottle of disinfectant and a folded stack of rags, sat a 26-year-old woman, a cheap flashlight glowing over pages of advanced calculus. Amara Cole didn't scramble to her feet. She stayed perfectly still, the beam steady, the book open, as if the $30 million view outside the glass were just a picture on a wall. "Mr. Drake," she said, voice even, "I've finished the house. I was taking a moment to study before heading to my next shift." Lionel came down the glass steps in silent, heavy strides, silk pajamas at war with a cleaner's simple uniform. At 42, he had built an empire by reminding people of their place, and a cleaner studying calculus on his floor was, to him, very far out of place. "Study?" He laughed once, low and contemptuous. "This isn't a public library. I pay you to clean, not to pretend." Amara closed the book without flinching and slipped a scuffed $5 calculator into her tote with careful hands. Everything about the way she moved said storms had passed over her before, loud, cruel, unending, and she was still standing. "With respect, sir," she replied, "the house is spotless, as I always leave it." The answer made something ugly twist in Lionel's expression. For 6 months she'd been invisible to him. A pair of gloves, a quiet yes, a vanishing door chime. Finding her now under his chandelier with college texts and a beam of stubborn light stirred something older than logic in him. "Listen closely," he said, leaning in, using height like a weapon. "People like you have a place in this city. Don't pretend to be something you're not. It's embarrassing." Something cool flickered in Amara's eyes. Not anger. Something quieter. Something certain. "People like me," she repeated, letting the words weigh themselves. Interesting. She had seen the emails left open after late meetings, heard names, dates, and prices no one meant for her to hear. Watched signatures land on papers that moved neighborhoods like chess pieces. Information a careless man would never imagine a cleaner could read, much less remember. "You're fired," Lionel said softly, the kind of softness that bruises. "Collect your things. Don't ask for a reference." Amara stood, gathered the book, and walked to the door. She didn't beg. She didn't look sorry. She looked like a clock had just struck the hour it was meant to. "Mr. Drake," she said, one hand on the handle, her voice echoing in the marble. "My mother used to say, never underestimate the person you've trained yourself not to see." Then she left, carrying a tote bag, a flashlight, a stack of notes, and 6 months of quiet observation that would soon become the most expensive lesson of Lionel Drake's life. At 8:02 a.m., while Lionel rehearsed 3 different versions of the story he'd tell his board, none of which contained the word fired, Amara pushed into the public library with the cheap metal door that pretended not to groan. She chose the same back table she always chose. It let her see the law shelves and the sky at the same time. She unpacked like a person setting a small lab. Calculus on top, battered black composition book beneath, a folder thick with printed screenshots and phone photos. A used laptop that ran hot but refused to die. She dated the top of a page and wrote a neat, stubborn script. Termination confirmed. Objectives unchanged. Timeline compressing. Her phone buzzed. "Jennifer, did you get another shift?" "Mom's worried," Amara typed back, "working on something better. Trust me." She added a heart she only sent to family, then flipped the composition book open. 6 months of entries lay there like a map. Thursday night investor names. Courier envelopes stamped with a city seal. A land assembly on Carson, purchased 2 weeks before the transit announcement. A consulting fee paid to a nephew of a zoning chair. Times, amounts, initials. Cross-referenced to public records. Cross-checked against permit updates and board agendas. A web invisible until you stepped far enough back to see the shape, and until you knew how to read it. She hadn't taken the cleaning job by accident. After graduating top of her cohort in economics while juggling 2 jobs in a family apartment that carried every sound, she'd sent out 100 resumes and gotten back 3 no thank yous, all saying the same thing in nicer words. Not our culture. So she changed her plan. If the front door stayed locked, she would walk in through service. On the other side of town, Lionel practiced calm with Janet on speaker. The board item is routine, he said. They want to feel important. We'll give them something to sign. Janet cleared her throat. There's chatter about an audit, sir. A councilman went on local radio last night. He used the phrase, fast-tracked variances. Lionel's jaw ticked. Let him talk. He ended the call and flipped a bronze paperweight. Watched the city seal on the letter he'd opened at 3:17 a.m. stare back like an unblinking eye. At 10:30, a young man in a thrift store blazer paused at the library's back table. Am I intruding? He asked, careful, as if approaching a skittish bird. I'm Marcus Hale. I think we have a common problem. Amara lifted her eyes. Something in the way he stood told her he wasn't a tourist. She gestured to the opposite chair. My scholarship doesn't cover the arrogance tax, Marcus said, sitting. I wait tables at the Haldane Club 3 nights a week. I served Drake last night. He thought I was furniture. He talked about a cleaner studying in his living room like it was a punchline. He paused. I'm an investigative reporter, freelance. I've been trying to get inside Drake's world for a year and a half. I've got threads, no fabric. Amara's mouth twitched. What kind of fabric would you need? The kind with names and numbers stitched into it, he said. Dates, sums, screenshots, patterns. Amara slid the composition book closer. Not all of it. Enough. Marcus turned a page. His breath left him in a small, involuntary sound. You cataloged it. I organized what they left lying around, she said. The way I organize a kitchen drawer. It all goes somewhere. He read in silence for a long stretch, 15 minutes by the clock above the reference desk. When he finally looked up, his eyes had the sharp light of a man who'd seen the outline of a story that could move a city. This is enough to start, he said. If we verify each piece, cross-confirm with one more source, and get a legal scrub, we can run. But the first run will only stick if we have one thing they can't wave away. What? Amar asked. A recording, he said. A voice, his voice, an offer. Amara nodded once. In her head, a schedule unfolded. Thursday routines, the service elevator's blind spots, the hidden angle of the foyer camera that pointed past the private bar where Lionel liked to pour his men 25-year scotch. I think I can make that happen, she said, but we do it clean. They set ground rules right there on the laminate. She kept control of raw materials. He kept control of publication. No names until necessary. No leaks. No ego. They met at odd hours in safe places, the seniors' computers between 7 and 8 a.m., the forgotten bench behind the courthouse at lunch, the bus stop under the dead security light at 11 p.m. Marcus verified the payment stubs through shell companies that linked eventually to a legal firm with an innocuous name and a partner who played golf on Thursdays. Amara pulled parcel maps and land records from open databases no one bothered to check because they thought open meant harmless. The anger came at night sometimes, like a freight train. Amara let it pass. She kept the map. On a Thursday 2 weeks later, Lionel hosted a quiet investor huddle in his penthouse. 5 men who wore watches like flags, 1 woman whose laugh was a blade, and a junior fixer with a haircut that cost what Amara sent home to her mother in a week. She cleaned early, left the place shining, and replaced the foyer plant camera facing the bar with the identical unit ordered off a professional supplier's website. Legally purchased, legally owned, logged and sealed. No bug, no wiretap. Simply the building's own camera, pointed where it should have been pointed all along. At 9:42 p.m., Palka Lionel said the line she needed him to say, the one that always sounds harmless to the person who's gotten away with it long enough. We'll take care of the permits. You'll get a heads up before the transit announcement. He named a number. He named a name at City Hall. He named a timeline. At 11:08 p.m., the service hallway camera caught Amara walking out with a tote bag in empty hands. She'd taken nothing that wasn't hers. By Saturday, Marcus had the footage mirrored in 3 secure places. A media lawyer watched and didn't blink. If they sue, she said, we'll win. But you're going to need to brace. This will be loud. Monday, Marcus said, 6 a.m. Monday, Amara echoed, and on Sunday night she stood in the doorway of the tiny apartment while her mother, Yvonne, folded dish towels with the patience of a woman who'd worked double shifts at a nursing home for 19 years. You're quiet, Yvonne said, not looking up. Big week, Amara said. You're your grandmother's girl, Yvonne replied. She used to say anger's a fever, strategy's a cure. Amara smiled. I wrote that down. Write this down too, Yvonne said. No matter what happens, we eat together on Friday. Friday, Amara promised. And Monday at 6:01 a.m., while Lionel stood in his kitchen and watched a coffee machine pour a perfect ribbon into a perfect cup, the city's largest paper published a front-page story that cracked like thunder. The headline didn't bother with poetry. It named names. It printed numbers. It described in steady black type a pattern of bribes disguised as consulting, land buys 1 week before public decisions, and the voice of a man who had considered himself untouchable promising heads-ups on a housing project designed to serve the very people his schemes displaced. Lionel's phone went feral, Janet first, then the bank, then 2 directors, then the fixer whose haircut suddenly looked like a liability. He answered none of them. He watched a video clip with the sound off, then with the sound on, then with the sound off again, as if muting could unfabricate the syllables. At 8:23 a.m., a city councilwoman he'd funded twice tweeted a 7-sentence statement announcing support for a full independent investigation. By noon, the bank had frozen 3 accounts. By 1:45, the mayor's office announced a special session. By 2:10, a second paper published a timeline independently matching the first. At 3 p.m., an unmarked sedan eased to the curb outside Lionel's tower. Mr. Drake, the older agent said at the private elevator, voice polite enough to remind Lionel what real power sounds like. We're here with a warrant. He opened the door. He had always been practical. They took duplicate server drives and a box labeled Archive 4 that hadn't been opened since a move 5 years ago. They took a narrow binder clipped with green tags, the one Lionel had always liked because it felt clean to look at, like a ledger that balanced. They left the paintings and the couch and the sense of belonging. That last thing goes last. Down at the library, the afternoon light was the color of lemon rind across Amara's table. She watched a little boy in a red sweatshirt point at a book about trains. Joy rose in her chest, pure and untidy, and she let it. Marcus arrived at 4:10 with 2 coffees and eyes that looked both older and younger. Round 1 landed, he said. We go again Wednesday. The housing project tranche and the transit corridor. Amara nodded. He'll push back through proxies. He already is, Marcus said. 3 burner accounts, 1 community leader with a suspicious LLC, and a blog post under a pseudonym that accidentally reused a staffer's old signature. They smiled. The kind you exchange with someone who knows that the other team just fumbled in slow motion. The first wave of ugly arrived that night, of course. It always does. Anonymous comments that tried to make her small, with words that smelled like basement mold. A friend from high school who appeared in her messages like a snake in an old shoe. She muted. She documented. She texted Marcus, saved screenshots. He replied with a PDF already collated by time, source, IP, and error pattern. On Wednesday, the second story hit. On Friday, the third. By the following Tuesday, 2 of Lionel's consultants had retained criminal defense counsel. On Thursday, a junior deputy commissioner resigned to spend more time with family. On Friday, the transit chair released emails he said were taken out of context, which is what you say when the context is the problem. In the middle of it all, Yvonne made stew. Jennifer, who was 19 and loud with ambition, taped index cards to the kitchen cabinet that read MCAT in purple marker. Malik, their neighbor down the hall, fixed the wobbly kitchen stool for the second time with 1 brass screw that he swore was lucky. On Friday night, they ate together the way Yvonne had insisted, with elbows on the table and laughter that sounded like wooden spoons clinking. At the end of the second week, Lionel finally called Marcus. You and I both know this is theater, Lionel said. His voice had lost the lacquer. No, Marcus replied. This is record. You think you can burn me and keep your hands clean? I don't need to think it, Marcus said. We verified it. Lionel hung up. He stared out at a city that looked different now, as if the angles had shifted. He had always preferred dealing with men who wanted what he wanted. A reporter who wanted the truth was messy. A cleaner who wanted the truth and knew calculus was worse. The indictment didn't come then. These things take time. But a civil action did. And Lionel read the names on the caption with something that might have been nostalgia if nostalgia felt like shame. He sat in the dark without switching on a light. For a long time, he didn't move. It occurred to him for the first time in months that he had never asked himself what Amara studied, only that she shouldn't. He should have asked. The hearing room was designed to be boring on purpose, beige enough to slow heart rates, bright enough to keep secrets away. Amara sat 2 rows back, blue blazer, hair in a knot, hands clasped around a pen she didn't click. Marcus sat to her left with a notebook full of boxes waiting to be ticked. The board counsel moved like a man who lived on rules and caffeine. He began with the obvious and kept it that way. Exhibit numbers, dates, transcripts. The video wasn't played in full. It didn't need to be. 3 sentences were enough. Lionel's counsel objected on 2 grounds and a third out of habit. The chair overruled him twice and side-eyed him the third. A junior member of the board, who had grown up 5 blocks from the library and still used it on Saturdays with his kid, asked Lionel to explain the heads-up comment. Lionel explained for 4 minutes and 52 seconds. The room felt the air change halfway through. Outside, microphones bloomed like spring. Marcus stepped forward and said exactly 1 sentence. "Our reporting speaks for itself." Amara did not step forward. She stepped sideways into shade and called Yvonne. "We're okay," she said, smiling, and Yvonne's relief filled the space like music. By month 3, the company's interim CEO announced a comprehensive review. By month 4, the board accepted Lionel's resignation, effective immediately. He released a statement about focusing on my family. The internet said its piece. Then the Attorney General said hers, and a lot of other pieces stopped midair. The morning the charges were filed, Amara sat with Jennifer on the apartment floor, legs tucked under, 2 bowls of cereal sweating lightly in the heat. They read the press conference transcript together. When it was over, Jennifer tilted her head. "You could have kept the tape," she said softly. "Sold it. Hurt more people. Why didn't you?" "Because anger without strategy is noise," Amara said, "and because justice isn't a souvenir." 2 weeks later, an email arrived that made Amara whisper, "Oh," in a tone she hadn't used since she was 10, and the first school acceptance letter came. It was from Acker and Fenn, the compliance and risk group that had rejected her resume 2 years earlier, with a form letter about fit. The subject line read, "Senior Analyst, Community Risk and Infrastructure, Interview Invitation." She didn't tell Marcus until after she'd accepted. When she finally did, he whooped in the library and earned a shh from the world's gentlest librarian. "You're going to change their bloodstream," he said. "That's what you're going to do?" Yvonne bought a small cake from the corner bakery and wrote Amara in shaky blue icing. Malik hung a crooked string of thrift store lights over the doorway and declared the apartment a headquarters. Jennifer made a playlist titled The Cure and insisted they dance. On a warm Friday at dusk, Amara stood on the roof with a paper plate and watched the city throw its first stars. "You know," she said into the soft wind, "when he said people like you, I didn't hate him." "What did you do?" Marcus asked. "I decided to make the phrase expensive." The trial came later, with suits and binders and a jury that looked like the city on a day when everything is open. Lionel wore a navy suit that fit like a memory of confidence. He looked smaller anyway. The recordings were admitted. The cross-examination was competent. The verdict was clean. On the day of sentencing, the judge said the things judges say when they are tired of hearing themselves explained to men of means that rules are not suggestions. Lionel said he was sorry. The room heard what rooms like that always hear, a man surprised by consequences. Afterwards, outside, microphones sprouted again. Marcus said, "No comment." Amara slipped away. She walked 3 blocks to the library and stood under the high window, where the light looks different. She put her palm on the back of the chair she had used 100 mornings and whispered, "Thank you," to a piece of plastic and wood. Gratitude doesn't care what it touches. 6 months later, the city had learned a new muscle. A grant created a small unit inside Acker and Fenn that audited public-private projects for signals of exactly the patterns Amara had mapped by hand. They called it the Cole Protocol because somebody in marketing had a sense for symmetry. Amara didn't argue. She wrote the checklist and taught the first cohort how to use it. Her office window didn't face the skyline. It faced the courtyard, where a maple turned red by degrees. Students from the university came to hear her talk about Strategy as a social tool. She began each talk with a story about a flashlight on a marble floor at 3:01 a.m. It always landed. Marcus won an award he pretended not to care about and used the money to start a small fellowship for reporters from neighborhoods like theirs. He named it after Yvonne because she'd fed them both and told them both to sleep when they forgot how. Yvonne retired one ordinary Tuesday. She stood at the threshold of the nursing home, looked back once at the clock she'd watched for 19 years, and walked home with a bag of goodbye cupcakes. She planted basil on the windowsill and called it her farm. Jennifer got into med school and texted Amara a photo of a stethoscope with the caption, "We did it." Malik opened a tiny repair shop on the corner, hung a bell on the door, and rang it whenever anybody brought him something that was harder to fix than it looked. Lionel woke every day to the same color walls. He read books he would have despised a year earlier. He wrote a letter to no one about the first time he understood that people like you was a mirror, not a map. He folded it and put it in a library book he would never see again. Maybe someone would find it. Maybe someone wouldn't. It didn't matter. The act was the point. On a Friday evening, Amara walked into her apartment to find Yvonne and Jennifer arguing cheerfully about music. The table was set with thrift store plates that didn't match and the good forks that did. She put her bag down and breathed in a smell she would always recognize. Home, garlic, and the last hour of a week somehow survived. "Sit," Yvonne said. "Tell me the best thing and the hardest thing." "Nakone." "The best thing," Amara said, "was that a junior analyst told me today she'd never thought of herself as a person who could say no to a senior partner. And then she did." "And the hardest?" "Realizing I still keep my flashlight in my bag," Amara said, smiling, "even when all the lights are on." "You keep it," Yvonne said. "Some lights are not for rooms, some are for people." After dinner, Amara walked to the roof. The city below had the hush it gets before the late rush. She thought about the first time she had written the sentence that had saved her from her own anger. Anger without strategy is noise. Strategy is a map. She wrote a new one, just as plain. Success without service is a costume. Service makes it fit. A text arrived. "Marcus, speech tomorrow. Ready?" She typed, "Always." He sent a thumbs up and a photo of his battered notebook. Some tools don't need to be replaced when they still know your hands. The auditorium the next morning held 500 faces. Students, workers, a cluster of city staffers in shirt sleeves. Amara stepped to the lectern and did not clear her throat. She did not grip the sides. She told the story the way she always told it now. Not about a villain and a hero, but about a city learning to see who it had trained itself not to see. "When someone tells you to know your place," she said near the end, "listen carefully, because sometimes they are giving you a map to their own fear. Your place is where your preparation takes you. Bring a light. If a door isn't there, make one. And when you walk through, leave it open behind you." She paused. "Let the room hold the words and warm them with breath. Also," she added, and the smile reached her eyes, "keep your floors clean, metaphorically and literally. You never know when you'll need to sit down and study." The room laughed. Then it stood. Outside, the day was the kind that makes even old buildings look young. Amara walked back to the library because she always did after speeches. Inside, a little girl sat at the table with a workbook and a pencil that needed sharpening. She looked up as Amara passed, and for a moment their eyes met. Two steady lines on the same graph, drawn years apart. Amara took the pencil from her own bag and set it on the table without a word. The girl smiled the small smile of someone who has been given exactly what she needs at the exact second she needs it. On the way out, Amara glanced at the high window where the sky made its quiet square. She thought, not for the first time, that some places are not measured in square feet or marble dollars. They are measured by what you can build from them that wasn't there before. Back in her office, she opened the Cole Protocol checklist and added one more line beneath the last step, in letters that were neat and plain and therefore permanent. "Remember who couldn't see you, then help someone they can't see yet." The city that had once been arranged to keep people like her out had learned to make room. Not enough room, not yet, but more than before. Enough to begin. And somewhere, a man who had once believed marble made him safe closed his eyes and saw a small circle of light on a floor, steady and patient. illuminating the exact page that would one day be used to calculate his fall. If this story of strategy, courage, and consequence moved you, follow for more true-to-life narratives, where quiet preparation outworks loud prejudice, and where people who were never meant to be seen bring a whole city into the light.